Hello, good day everybody. Today we're going to be changing the combination switch in the Toyota Camry, which is a 2015. This lovely thing, by just looking at it, you kind of already know you got to pull the steering wheel forward. So this will probably be the first video on YouTube for it. And this is the actual part number. This is not through AutoZone or anything like that. This is from actual Toyota. And the part number here is everything that goes with it. Also too, I'm going to be showing in the video how to remove the steering wheel and how to get everything accessible so you can change all of this out. Stay tuned. So this is what's going on with the switch for me to be even changing it. It won't turn the lights on basically. And when it is on, for instance, if you turn on the turn signal, it will cut it off. So that's what we're trying to rectify now. So to correct myself about the airbag removal, I was wrong. Those two 8mm bolts were not it's actually supported to that little frame back there, which is kind of hidden right now because it's kind of dark. But you actually have two springs on each side that you have to push in. It's kind of dark, and I'm sorry about that. But that spring has to be pushed in and released. And once it's released, you can move the airbag, like so. So let me finish pulling it out, and I'll turn everything back on. So now that those springs have been popped off, this just comes off like this. And you must disconnect these and try not to break them. And also behind that, you see your bolt that holds it in there. And then once you pull all of that out the way, you can pull the steering wheel off. Okay, and when you're pulling these off, make sure you pull these little tabs all the way up. Slides off like so. So when you go back together, you can't mix them up because they're color coded. If you do happen to mix them up, I don't know how you'd be able to do that, but I've seen stranger things that happen. And also remove the ground that's here. Oh, I'm gonna use two hands for this. It is a 19mm socket to pull that screw out. So keep in mind, when you break the screw, you gotta use a little bit of effort, but after that, this comes off by hand. Also, too, another thing, you might also want to use a steering wheel puller because it's in there. There are ways to pull it out, but honestly, it's a lot easier and safer using a steering wheel puller because you don't risk bending the wheel and causing more issues to it. Keep in mind, you have the paddle shifts on this and you don't want to break them. So be extra careful whichever route that you take. Hopefully a route that involves using the steering wheel puller. So now, got the steering wheel puller in place. Twist that. I did it with the ratchet earlier, but as you can see, it didn't take much effort to get it out. So now, the only thing you got left to do, move this out of the way. Finish taking that nut off. And be careful with the cables because they got to go through the back of here. Oh, that nut's in there. And you can kind of slide it off and see where you got to work with. Also, too, keep in mind that steering clock back here, you do not want to mess that up to where it pops out and gets unoriented. So make sure you have your steering wheel straight up and down and your tires are going forward, because if not, it's going to throw all kind of error codes when you start driving it. All right, so now we got the steering wheel out of the way. It's laying over there. Take these two Phillips head screws out. Also, keep in mind the top part of this cover should just unsnap at this point. So be careful not to force it and break any of the little tabs in there. Like so. Well, I think y'all all get the idea. So to remove the steering clock, you have a tab up top here that has to come up. And then you have one down here, right there. And then one on the other side. And once you pull those out the way, everything should come on out. Like so. If you want to make it easier for yourself, you can unplug these different plugs that are plugged into the bottom of the steering clock. So now we're going to finish taking apart this puzzle. Now you need a screwdriver to pop that loose, preferably a small one. Now what I did for this, I just stuck it in there, kind of pushed it in a little bit, pulled that little tab up right here. And when I pulled the tab, I had both hands. I can kind of pull on this stalk, which you see just basically moves out of the way like so. So put that to the side. Now we have the rest of the tabs we got to take off. If you look at your new one, this is the new one that's going in. You got 1, 2 major tabs that's got to come off. The one on top, one on bottom. Once you pull it off, it slides right out. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, once you move those 2 tabs up and out of the way, you're gonna have to fight with it a little bit just to get it off. So if you end up breaking this one, that's not bad because this is your old one anyway. And it should come straight forward like this. But if it doesn't, that means you just had to fight a little bit just to get it out. But out with the old, in with the new. And it just basically goes back together in reverse. Kind of like this. When it's back in place, you should hear a little click. Like that. So now everything's back together. No movement, no slipping or anything. So I'm gonna go back together with it. I know a lot of y'all don't need the rest of this video, but I'm gonna do it for the ones who might actually need it as far as trying to see where everything goes, you know, after you took everything apart. So give me a second, let me start reassembling, and we'll have her back ready to go. Once I line everything up. Oh man. Also too, notice the click. Also too, good rule of thumb is to pay attention to make sure all of the connectors and everything go back the same way the other one came out the old one. Also too, if it doesn't match, you might have a problem. So what you want to do is compare everything before you start putting everything together, because that way you don't want to have to pull all this stuff back out like, oh my God, I put it together wrong. And in actuality, it's the wrong part. So I'll be back here in a second. So now basically everything's going together like so. Make sure your steering clock is still in line, straight up and down. So that's back in place. Start plugging everything back up. Like so. Now, we can put our covers back on, which I'm gonna need 2 hands for. So I'll come back in a second. Okay, now, we got the steering wheel going back on. Just in case I didn't say it, make sure you disconnect your battery first before you even think about attempting to do anything with the airbag. If you don't disconnect it, you risk the airbag going off in your face. And nobody wants that. So now we're gonna thread everything back through here. Kind of like this, your airbag lines. Make sure you're careful on redoing all of this stuff, because the last thing you want to do is break a wire and have to go to the dealer and buy a new wire because you weren't being patient. So now that all that's lined back up in there, make sure your steering clock is back at 12. Once again, I keep reiterating that for a reason, because like I said, if it's not on 12, you're gonna have issues that's gonna keep popping up on your car, which probably will make your car think it's not in alignment. So there, that's back into place. So we're gonna plug all of these plugs back in that are here. And I am sure there's actual torque spec for this steering wheel bolt. So normally what I do, rule of thumb, if you don't have a torque wrench, make sure your steering wheel is locked. So when you tighten it down with the ratchet or whatever tool that you're using to take it off with, make sure it's tight enough to where it feels like it's never coming off again. So let me go ahead and torque this down. Okay, now we got everything put back into place. Now, got to put our ground back on for the airbag, which is here. So, make sure you put that ground back on tight. Right there while I'm doing that. Which the main part I want you all to see is how these airbag plugs go back on. So we got that back on. Now it's time for these two. Yeah. Okay. Make sure you still got these little yellow pieces up. So when you plug them in, it's just gonna drop in like that. Just push in. And then do the other side the same way. Well, for some odd reason I want to line up. There it is. Push it in. Make sure it's in flush. And then push the little yellow part down until they click. Like so. Now, you just pop the airbag back in. You hear a click for each side, or all the 3 points of connection. And once you get those 3 clicks, everything's done. Only thing you got to do now is just check your work. So now I'm gonna hook the battery back up and make sure we got lights. Okay. That's all anyway. So now we got lights. No issues like the old style. What a original problem. So everything's working as it should. And that's how you replace the combi switch on a 20.